So I would assume that there are various types of sex trafficking and human trafficking, and I would assume that in a general sense there's a connection or correlation to how that affects the victims. Can you just kind of describe some of the different, I don't want to say categories, that seems, insensitive, but can you describe some of the differences in different types of sex trafficking?
Well, again, my experiences in foreign countries for the sex trafficking. I do have experience, some experience in the U.S. from the law enforcement side, which led me to what I ended up doing too. So there's everybody's heard of the basics of human trafficking, like how people become involved, become a what I call a victim of sex trafficking. One is, and that's how you understand really and explain the other parts of it. Imagine a woman in country A that she is in a family of 7, and she's the oldest daughter, and they are scraping everything the father and mother are just to feed the family, and the oldest daughter is 14 or 15. The father and mother say, we can't feed you, we can't support you anymore. You're going to have to make it on your own. And it happens all the time, especially in third world countries. And they're out on their own, and they have a couple choices. One choice is to try to find a job, and jobs are scarce. Second choice is, sex trafficking, to become involved in the sex trade. And so that is, it's not really forced, but it's a decision that's forced upon them based upon their environment. So that's one form of sex trafficking. Another form of sex trafficking is imagine a large population that's been pushed from one country to another because of maybe religious views. And this large population ends up in a refugee camp. And within that refugee camp, there is little to no food, very little critical infrastructure within the camp. And so a sex trafficker will come into the camp and tell the father that I will provide your daughter money. She'll send money back to you. I'm going to give her a job. She's only going to be 3 to 4 hours away. That woman then, in most cases, in one of the countries that I'm referring to, will be moved to a port. On a port, there's a large international ship that is there that's moving supplies from country A to country C, and that one will end up on that ship, and then at one point is never to be seen again. Ends up in a port of another country, disembarked, and is thrown into a brothel and the sex trade. The other form, or another example that we've had to deal with recently, was a young woman, for example, that's working in a restaurant. She was an orphan on the street, and a sex trafficker comes into the restaurant because they frequent those kind of places in third world countries, and they see a young girl in there working, and they'll tell the owner, your daughter, she's so beautiful. That's usually kind of the lead comment. And the owner will say, it's not my daughter. She was an orphan. I give her a job and a place to sleep, and I give her some food. And the trafficker will say, what if I give you so much money for her? And then that girl ends up on a plane, on an internal airline, moved to a border. If she is a fairly attractive young lady, 12 to 18, some money can be got from her by forcing her into the sex trade. That's where she'll go. If she's not, she could end up crossing that border of that country north into another country, and she will become the victim of organ harvesting.
I think that from an American perspective, right, and maybe it's just my naivety, how is there not a moment where the victim, and whether this is a victim of 14 years or someone that's older, do they not have the ability when they're being moved from point A to point B to scream out to someone what's happening? Are they unaware? Is it cultural? Is there some patriarchal situation where they're not able to speak up about the fact that they've been removed from their family and they're being, shipped from one place to another. How are they not able to signal to someone what's going on?
Well, two cases. One is they have most of them. These are orphans, in one the case I was mentioning, and it's either through the fear of threats of physical violence against them because they're very young, and the traffickers are usually quite a bit older than them, and they've done this many times. They know how to intimidate them. That's one. Second is through a ruse that they think they're going to somewhere better than they came from, and how nice the trafficker is to them, and giving them money and maybe buying them clothes, and all of a sudden they're flying on an internal airplane, or they're riding in a nice car to a utopia, a great place for them to be. That's how that usually occurs.